Hi, this is Sean Waltman from Google. Today we're going to be talking about Google Maps Engine and Safe FME. Google Maps Engine is Google's purpose-built geospatial platform that allows users, corporations, or agencies to upload, stylize, and then share maps of their geospatial data either privately with their own users or publicly with the world. And Safe FME, which is a GIS industry standard ETL tool that allows you to bring in multiple formats of geospatial data from web services, from desktop files, and create transformations, modify that data, or just simply convert that data and write it out in some other location. In this instance, we're actually going to write it out to Google Maps Engine. So this first episode is going to be about syncing geospatial data to Google Maps Engine. Why? Well, there's a lot of great geospatial data out there. If you take a look with the open data initiatives that are happening, there's geoplatform.gov. Each state and local agency is trying to get their data out there and available to the public. Or you might just have some really interesting data that has a spatial component to it. There's a natural tendency to want to be able to get at this data and be able to put it into useful products. A great data source and a great example of this is FEMA has the Civil Air Patrol Images Map. Now, this is a map that's constantly updated, and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, works with the Civil Air Patrols from various states. And what they do is the Civil Air Patrols are typically the first ones in the air after a disaster. For instance, here's a shot from this past April when there was a series of tornadoes in Arkansas. And the Civil Air Patrol there got up, and they have folks with a camera pointing out the side of an aircraft or a helicopter, and they're able to take images. And these are really, really useful images, not just to be able to show first responders what's happening on the ground, but for people doing damage assessments, for citizens, and this data is all in the public domain. But this data is currently being served out of a ArcGIS server sitting on an Amazon instance, which is maintained by FEMA. We've had experience taking this data and bringing it into Google Crisis Map. Google Crisis Map is google.org's open source platform that allows users to very easily bring in multiple sources of data. Here you can see that there's some place marks in here about flooding and roadblocks, road closures, for instance. And this is typically done by either Google's crisis response engineers, the core team, or anybody in the world can actually go and start a Google Crisis Map and start bringing in various layers of data. So in this case, this is actually the Colorado floods from 2013, and you can see that these green dots here are actually the flights and the images that are coming from the Civil Air Patrol. Now, when this map was created in 2013, this was a manual process, and what you would typically have to do is go out and try to scrape against the ArcGIS server that FEMA has, download the points, and then upload it to Google Maps Engine. And the reason for doing this is that we've had a lot of experience with Google Crisis Maps over the years, and we've seen tremendous traffic. Here's the traffic graph from the Hurricane Sandy event in 2012. We had millions of people coming to Google Crisis Map wanting to load data, and if we put data just directly like Google Crisis Map supports, we can point it towards any server that we want. But if we do that, you really risk some major problems happening with that source server, because I don't know what that source's infrastructure is like. I can take a look at the URLs and I can figure out that this is an ArcGIS server running on Amazon EC2. Is it load balanced? What's the redundancy? What kind of traffic can we have? And this is something that we see in our customer base very, very frequently, where applications that are built on this type of infrastructure tend to fall over pretty quickly because of just the amount of server load and the way that the requests coming in from large traffic. These work fine for small user bases, but when you start throwing millions of people at them, not only can they fall over, but if they don't fall over, they could also become very, very expensive because you're going to have a lot of compute happening every time one of these dynamic queries comes in. And you're also going to have a lot of bandwidth potentially for people coming and actually pulling data off of the server. And that's assuming that you don't really know about the actual source's infrastructure. If you do know about the source's infrastructure, it might scare you even more because you know what you've got going, and you tell somebody that's standing up something expecting to serve 1,000 users, and now there's 18 million users. That's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem in cost, and it may just not work at all. So, the The better approach, we believe, is to take that data and put it onto a platform that's really designed to scale. And so Google Maps Engine, it's actually deployed on Google servers just like anything else, like your Gmail, like Google search results. So Google serves over 20 billion pages a day. We've got users all over the world uploading over 72 hours of video per minute. And so Google servers, Google Maps, they handle this type of traffic. They're designed for it. And so when you put data into Google Maps Engine, you can rest assured that that data is going to scale, that it's going to be able to handle even the most crazy traffic that we've ever seen. And if you put that data into Google Maps Engine, it's then free for you to be able to serve it through two properties, one being the Google Maps Gallery, and the other being Google Crisis Maps. Now, if you take this data and you want to put it into a third-party application, if you want to sync this data and put it onto your own, county website, there's going to be the standard enterprise terms for serving the data. But there's a ton of traffic that comes through Google Maps Gallery and Google Crisis Maps, and you can take advantage of these two properties and the traffic that comes to them, especially during a crisis, and not have to worry that there's going to be a bill at the end of the day. There's no cost for actually serving it through these properties. So in this case, this project is going to walk us through taking data from FEMA and then serving it essentially free into Google Crisis Maps itself, all coming through Google Maps Engine. Okay, so here we have the Civil Air Patrol Images map, which FEMA has serving off of their ArcGIS server on Amazon. And you can see this data has lots of points, different flights throughout the United States. You can click on any one of these points and pick up an image from that individual flight. And clicking on that image will then open up a new page where you actually get the full-size image. So what we can do is we can come into this map and take a look at the content, and we can see that there is this cap images layer, and we can go to the description. Now this description, this is your ArcGIS REST services directory, so this should be familiar for ArcGIS server users. And you can see that there's a legend, there's the some metadata about the actual layer itself, and then I actually have the layer itself. So I can click on cap images, and now I can see that this is actually a feature service that's available, and one of the supported operations is query. So query is, I'm actually going to use this to go ahead and grab the geometries and all the data related to this layer and get it as a JSON feed. So I can change this over to JSON, and just in this example I can do, I can say where 1 equals 1 and do a simple query, and you can see that I'm getting a JSON response. And you can see that this JSON has a geometry, here's a point with a lat long, here's an attribute. And what Safe FME recommends is there's actually a shortcut to get all of the features, and there's a good note here, please make sure that your reading of publicly available data should only be done in accordance with the site terms and conditions of use. That's really, really important. Don't abuse a site, and don't steal data that you don't have permission to use. In this case, this is public domain data, and we're going to be very respectful about how often we hit the data. So we're going to take this little query string, which is basically going to say, give me all the fields, give me all the attributes, give me all the data possible, and I should just be able to append it now to this query for the service. And when I hit enter, this will be a much larger query, but now you'll see that I actually get all of the schema information. So I get the schema information, and now I get all of the results. Now that I have this data, I could use the Google Maps Engine API, and I could write my own Python or Java or Node.js or whatever my favorite programming language is, and I could write my own application to take this data and then use the GME API to automatically update a table or create a table inside of Google Maps Engine. But today we're going to be talking about how we can do this very, very easily with no coding required using Safe FME. So we're going to take this URL that we just found, and we're going to go over to FME Workbench. Now in FME Workbench, and this is the Mac version that I have running here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new reader. A reader in FME is what allows you to read data. So we're going to go ahead and add a reader, and in this case we're going to just paste that in there. It already detected it from my keyboard, and the format is automatically detected as Esri JSON. And the coordinate system, we can set that to 4326. We know that that data is in 4326. Now I just wanted to point out there are some parameters. If you had to have authentication or a proxy, FME Workbench gives you the ability to actually go in and add some of those features. And we'll go ahead and hit cancel, and we'll hit OK. So what's going to happen is it's going to go ahead and create that reader. It just read the data, and I can expand this now and see here are those fields. So FME makes a really nice and graphical way for me to see those different fields that are available. And you know what? We should take a look at this data. So we'll go ahead and we can just type inspector. And the inspector is going to actually allow us to, when we run this, and you'll see this is really cool. So you just grab the output of the reader and put it into the inspector. And from that inspector now, we can run this FME workspace, and it's actually going to go grab the data, and then it's going to launch the FME desktop data inspector. So this is a really, really useful tool. I can now actually take a look at the data itself rather than just seeing that, yes, it was a success. And you can see there's no map here, but I can zoom in and you can start to see that this is the United States. Obviously we have Florida here, and so these are the actual images and the actual points from the ArcGIS server. And if you take a look down in the tabular view, you can see that we also have all the fields. So we have the fields of the ID, the file name, the latitude, longitude, which of course is important, how old the image is, etc. So we have these different fields, and we can go ahead and exit this and be confident that we have a good read on this data. So the next piece is, very simply, we want to write this data somewhere. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add a new writer. And in this case, we're going to use Google Maps Engine. Of course, SAFE has hundreds of different formats and different places that you can write this to, but we're going to go ahead and say Google Maps Engine tables, and we're going to have to go into parameters here. Now, Google Maps Engine uses OAuth 2, and SAFE FME has integrated with the Google Maps Engine as a reader and writer the ability to use OAuth authentication. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to log in with my Google credentials, and we'll go ahead and sign in. And because I have two-factor authentication turned on my account, I'm going to have to put in a one-time password. Okay, so now it's going to ask me, this application, FME, would like to manage your Google Maps Engine data. So this is a restricted permission, and I'm saying, yes, I trust the FME application to act on my behalf against Google Maps Engine. And now I have to choose a project. And I'm in a lot of Google Maps Engine projects, so you'll see that I have a ton of different options here. But I'm going to go ahead and pick the Government Geo Team as my project, and OK. And I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to say OK. Now, it's saying the writer has been added. Would you like to add a new feature type to the writer? I'm going to say no. What I'm going to do instead, and you can see that I have this writer over here. It's not 100% configured yet. I'm going to right-click on the reader and say duplicate this on the writer. So now what's going to happen is there's going to be a one-to-one mapping of all of these fields. And we can go in to take a look at these fields and make some modifications. I don't want to call this Esri JSON. I want to call this cap images. And then I can take a look at the individual attributes, and I can see that there's different attribute types that are automatically detected because FME is really smart, and it figures out, it reads the schema, and it knows that things like the ID are an integer. It knows that the latitude and longitude are doubles. It knows that things like the image URLs for the individual images are strings, and then it knows that things like days old and image direction are integer. And this is important because if we want to stylize, if we want to create styling rules based on numerical values, we want to make sure that what's being written to Maps Engine is actually the correct data type. So we'll say OK. I'm going to go ahead here and disable this inspector because I actually want to do a dead simple writing to Google Maps Engine, reading from ArcGIS example here. So I'm going to kick off this translation, and we'll see what we get. Okay, so what's happening, you can see in the log, is that a new table is being created, and FME is taking care of the API write restrictions on how many features can be written at a single time, and now the translation is successful. So we're now going to switch back over to the browser and take a look at that Google Maps Engine project and look for a dataset called cap images. So back in my browser now, I'm going to go to mapsengine.google.com, which is the landing page for Google Maps Engine, and you can see that I'm logged in as myself, and then of course this is a Google product, so I have my one bar up here where I can go to my Drive and calendar and all that stuff. So this is Google Maps Engine if you haven't seen it before, and I'm in the Government Geo Team project. I can go to the dashboard here and just see some quick statistics about map usage, and I want to search for that cap images. So I'm going to search for a data source called cap images, and there it is. And I can take a look at this table, and we can see that we have we can take a quick preview, and now the map's a little bit more easy to understand because we actually have a base map here. So I can take a look at any one of these points and pull up all the feature attributes. So I can actually see the image URL, I can see the file size, all the different attributes are available here in this table. So what we have is a single one-time read from ArcGIS server and then a write to Google Maps Engine. And in following episodes, we'll actually go through the process of how do you keep these in sync. But for right now, we just wanted to get it, that basic workflow established. We're reading from one source and we're writing to another across different commercial platforms, across different geospatial products, using FME and the Google Maps Engine API as the glue that makes everything work together. So what we're going to do in this episode is just finish up by creating a styled version of this layer. So we're going to go ahead and take this table, and we're going to create a styled layer, and we're going to call it cap images is fine, the default. And one way that we can do this is go ahead and symbolize based on the days old attribute. So we're going to go here and add rule, and we're going to say 0 to 30 days. So I'm going to go add a filter. I'm going to say days old is less than or equal to 30. And I'm going to make this one we'll make this one a light green. And we'll say apply. And you'll see that after I hit that apply, we're going to have a live update preview of the layer style. So now we have you can see that apparently within the last 30 days there was some flights happening over in California. I'm going to go ahead and clone this rule, and we'll make this 31 to 60 days, and we'll keep going on with this process. We'll change that over here. We'll make the next one 61 to 180 days. So we'll change this to 60 and 180, and we'll make these yellow. And then we'll finally just say greater than 180 days, and we'll make this red. And we'll go ahead and hit apply. So now we can see our map that's updated with the different symbology based on how old the images are, and you can see we have a mixture here of different greens and reds. And the next step, if we click on one of these points, there's just kind of the ugly info window, which shows you all the fields that are attributed to that point. So what we want to do is actually take advantage of some of those fields. We'll click on the info window editor, and because these are images, I think the most important thing is to actually get the image up there itself. And this is a little JavaScript and HTML editor. So what we can do is just make a simple HTML tag. So we can say image source equals, and we can put the parentheses there. Now I can see that thumbnail URL, and you can see that the parentheses actually are our attributes for each individual feature. So I'm just going to grab that thumbnail URL and put that there, and then I'm going to put a simple break at the end and hit apply. And what this will do is actually for each feature take the thumbnail URL attribute, and because I'm setting it as an image, now when I click on each one of these points I actually get that thumbnail image. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and edit this so that we actually have a nice looking info window, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. Okay, so I spared you some of the details of going through and making these HTML edits, but I've trimmed out some of the fields, and the result is now that when I click on one of these points, I get a new info window that shows me a thumbnail. I have some metadata about that image, what team was associated when it was captured, how old that is, whether it was an approved image or not. The actual, you can see as I hover over the image, and I'm in the editor mode, so I'm not going to click on it, but I can open in a new tab, and you'll see that I actually get the full-size image, so I'm linking from the thumbnail directly to the full-size image. And what's really important is to make sure that you give credit to the source. And in this case, I've added the actual original source map so that anybody that has any concerns can come back to the original location where that data was retrieved from before we put it through FME and into Google Maps Engine. So now we have a really nice layer. We're going to go ahead and publish this. So we're going to hit exit in Google Maps Engine in the layer styling, and we're going to actually publish this layer. So we're going to take this layer, and we're going to click on Add to Map, and we're going to create a new map called Civil Air Patrol Images, similar to the original FEMA map name, and add it to this map. Okay, so now we have a preview of our new map, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we set the default viewport so that it's the United States, this nice view that we have here. And we're going to go into the map details view. And from the map details view, we're going to control the sharing for this particular map. By default, it's going to share the published version of this map is only going to be shared with the people inside of this project. We want to change that to the public access list. So we're going to change from map viewers to public access list, and we're going to update the permissions, and then we're going to go ahead and click Publish Map. Now that the map is published, we can access different access links. We just click on the access links, and we get a couple of different options. We get the Maps Engine viewer, which is just the default viewer. We also have the ability to embed it as an iframe. We can open it directly in Google Earth. We can use API access, and we'll come back to this in a second. And then we can also have OGC, so this map can also now be accessed via WMS. We'll go ahead and just take a quick look at the default map. So here's how any user would go out and see this map, and you can see that it's just a simple map, no legend or anything like that added to it. And we have various photos. So here's all those photos in Arkansas, and we can go ahead and click on any one of these points, and we'll see that we have a nice info window for each one of these, and we can click and go to any of those full-size images. And now I'm confident that this map, these layers, are not going to fall over. Back in the map details view, we can actually edit the details and give the map a description. So we can say Civil Air Patrol Images served by FEMA, and we can put the source in here and put the link back to the original map as well, and we can put that source information in there and hit save. And that description is important. It's a requirement if we want to submit this to the map gallery. And now that the map is updated and saved with its description, I'm able to go ahead and click Submit this map to the gallery. Now this allows me to actually get this map listed on the Google Maps gallery that we talked about earlier, and any views through the Google Maps gallery will incur no cost, no billing against the map itself. And through this page, I can put in the attribution, I can put in the tags, I can put in the proper usage restrictions, so I can say share alike or non-commercial use. If I have a specific EULA, I can link to that as well. And then I can put out all my publisher information and submit this to the gallery. This will really help this map get picked up in search. And again, we're confident that now that it's running on Google Maps Engine, that we're not going to have any issues with serving behind it. The final thing that we will talk about in this demonstration is now taking this map and contributing it to a Google Crisis Map. So the Google Crisis Map is an open source application, and it's available for anybody to come in and create a map. I'm going to create one in the google.com domain here, create a map, and I'm going to say I'm doing this for testing purposes. Make sure to read through all the acceptable use. I'm just going to say continue, and so I'm going to create a blank crisis map. And because I think that the Civil Air Patrol imagery is so important, for whatever crisis this may be, maybe it was a tornado or a hurricane, and we know that there's new imagery available, one of the things I'd want to be able to do is open up the crisis map. We'll give it a name. We'll say Crisis Demo. Say OK. We can come in here and add a layer. So one of the layer types that we can add is a Google Maps Engine layer. And what we need for this is two things. We need the map ID, and we need the layer key. So we come back to the Maps Details view. We're going to take a look at the access links, go to the API Access tab, and so it's really simple. I'm just going to grab this asset ID, that's the map ID, and then I'm going to grab the layer key, which for this only layer in this map is layer 1. So I'm going to copy that over here. I'm going to give this a title. I'm going to call it Civil Air Patrol Photos. And if I wanted to, I can go to the description, put the link, of course, back to FEMA, all those great things, and hit OK. And now in the Google Crisis Map, I actually have that layer served. And again, this layer is not going to go down. And anybody that comes in and sees this map is going to be hitting Google Maps Engine. They're not going to be going back to the original FEMA source. So that takes the load off of FEMA's ArcGIS server running on Amazon. It puts all of the load onto Google Maps Engine, which can scale, is designed to be able to handle massive traffic. And in the next episode, we're going to discuss how we can actually keep this data in sync using all the same styling and just sync the underlying data source using safe FME behind the scenes to create a workflow that syncs in with the FEMA server and only periodically checks that server, and then any changes are going to be pushed to the CAP imagery layer. So I hope this has been helpful in understanding how Google Maps Engine and Safe FME can work together to create a highly scalable and easily repeatable solution with little or no programming.